When playing the Disgaea games, have you ever thought to yourself, I'd love to see those cute Prinnies get their own adventure? Well, Prinny 1 and 2 Exploded and Reloaded lets you live out that dream, or nightmare, depending on how you look at it. Let's put on our Prinny scarf and set out on an adventure to review Prinny 1 and 2 on Nintendo Switch, dude! Prinny 1 and 2 Exploded and Reloaded takes Prinny Can I Really Be the Hero and Prinny 2 Dawn of Operation Panties Dude from the PSP and brings them to Nintendo Switch for the very first time. As a huge fan of the Disgaea series as well as other 2D action platformers, I really enjoyed both of these games back on the PSP in 2008 and 2010 respectively. I was really excited to see these hidden gems make their return to consoles all these years later, with a new audience being able to experience these games for the very first time. In Prinny Can I Really Be the Hero, Etna's dessert has been stolen, and while she initially believes a Prinny committed the deed, she sends off the Prinny squad to recover the fabled Ultra dessert to make up for this crime. In Prinny 2 Dawn of Operation Panties Dude, Etna's panties are stolen and she sends out the Prinny squad once again to recover them from the thief. If both of these plot descriptions sound very familiar to each other, that's because both games are actually structured narratively and mechanically very closely to one another. The story in both games definitely feels like the stories from mainline Disgaea games and are packed with humorous moments throughout. They don't really take themselves too seriously or anything like that, and if you're a fan of the story in other Disgaea games, you'll be right at home here. Both games also add an option for either English or Japanese voiceovers, depending on which option you prefer, which is a welcome sight for people like me who actually prefer Japanese voice acting. In both games, you don't just play as one Prinny, but a full 1,000 Prinny squad. Etna grants one of the Prinnies a magic scarf, which causes them not to explode to be tossed, which are Prinny's moral weakness, in order to make it through the adventure. You're given 999 lives at the start of the game, and each time you lose a life, you lose a Prinny. You play as the Prinny with the scarf, and essentially each time you die, the scarf is passed on to a new Prinny who assumes the role of the hero, and there's no real roguelite options or anything like that. You're not really getting differences between the Prinnies, it's just a visual difference. Now, I know what you might be thinking, Ryan, 999 lives sounds like a really high number. Surely there's no way that number can run out. But you would probably be wrong in thinking that. Both Prinny 1 and 2 are actually pretty difficult, even for someone like me who considers himself pretty good at 2D action platformers. They start off easy for the first few levels, but the difficulty ramps up pretty quickly. But once you get a good grasp of things, you'll find that the games hit a pretty good difficulty sweet spot. Each game has 2 difficulty options, one that allows you to take 3 hits before losing a Prinny, and also a 1-hit kill difficulty, which is very, very hard. Exclusive to Prinny 2, however, there's also a third option that allows you to take an additional hit on top of the 3 hits, plus it gives you some additional platforms to help the gameplay platforming go a little bit easier. With this remaster, I really would have loved to see this option added to Prinny as an accessibility option, as I think it really would have helped out new players to these games. There's also a ton of knockback from the enemies, so be ready to fall in the game's many numerous pits along your journey. Further adding to the difficulty are the game's controls. Since you're playing as a Prinny, you don't really move with the grace of Ryu Hayabusa or Mario, so the controls can actually feel pretty stiff at first, but once you get a good grasp on how the movement tech works, you'll find that it's actually not too bad and it's actually really fitting of Prinnies as a character. For example, if you jump straight up, you're not able to change direction mid-air, forcing you to really plan your jumps ahead of time and making sure that you plan your jumps accordingly. This can also lead to some deaths that make you feel kind of that you're at odds with the game's controls rather than your own player skill, but I personally never found this to become too frustrating, and it feels very much like learning mechanics of the NES platformers that I grew up with. In total, it took me about 20 to 25 hours to finish both games, so there's actually a lot of content here to explore. Visually, both games receive some levels of polish, but these games employ the classic Disgaea 1 and 2 look from their PS2 counterparts. The character models still look pretty good overall, with classic Disgaea characters looking just like their versions in the original PS2 games, but the UI elements and environments look pretty dated. It's very much a look that has defined the Disgaea games all the way up to their current iterations with Disgaea 5, and it will be hit or miss with a lot of people, but for me personally, I didn't really mind the look of the games myself, knowing where the series came from. That said, both games visually look much better on this version of the game versus their PSP counterparts, and with the bump of resolution for the Switch version, it makes everything look much cleaner, especially in handheld mode. When docked, it's less visually appealing, but it's certainly not a deal breaker for me, especially since the performance is rock solid across both the handheld and docked modes. Overall, I really enjoyed my time revisiting Prinny 1 and 2 Exploded and Reloaded. If you're a fan of the Disgaea mainline games and you like 2D action platformers, I think you're really going to have a good time with these games. It's a tough game to recommend for non-fans of the series, but I actually think that these games are actually pretty approachable for anyone who hasn't given the series a try yet, so if you're definitely new to the Disgaea games, maybe this might be a better place to start than the Disgaea mainline games. Those who have played the original releases won't find any new features or content here, but with the improved visuals, I think that they are well worth the price of the upgrade alone, and the Switch version is definitely the definitive way to revisit these two classic gems. Thank you so much for checking out my review of Prinny 1 and 2 Exploded and Reloaded. Huge thank you to NIS America for providing a code for review purposes. If you liked this video, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel, and you can reach out to me directly anytime at Ryan Turford.